It's all about the macro productions.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tack Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangles in Fort Lauderdale?
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the Sears hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you're watching us on Rockfin or Rumble, or you're listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a million. We appreciate the support. Have you rated the show? Please, if you don't mind, and share it with those that you think might be interested. Best way to connect with me is the website, macroaggressions.io. You can find out information about the books and the podcasts and all that good stuff. And we appreciate our sponsors. And there's information about our sponsors at the website in the partners page. And I curate the sponsors because I think that we've got to have brands that think like we think and sell products that actually work and benefit you. So I brought on some new ones. Brain Supreme. Adam Schell has been on the show to explain what it is. Microdoses of mushrooms, a variety of mushrooms, not just psilocybin, although that's in there. It's going to get you, you're going to get capsules, easy to take. Take 2 of them in the morning with some water and go off. I've been on the program now for a little over a week on the energy one, on the energy version. I am digging it. Adam was right. He said it'll take a little bit, sort of gradually creep up, and then that, boy, I can definitely feel it at the gym for sure. You just want to keep going and going and going. It's a very unusual feeling. I don't normally get that, but I've noticed that I've been getting it since I've been taking Brain Supreme. So if you're interested, go to the website, brainsupreme.co, not .com, .co. The link's going to be down in the show notes. So if you find something you like, the discount code is macro. But take a look and test it out and see what you think, because this formula is fantastic. So far, so good. So I encourage you, brainsupreme.co, promo code macro. And also to David Avocado Wolf. You can check out his store, davidwolf.com. That's Wolf with an E at the end, davidwolf.com, and take a look at the supplements that he sells. He's got a huge store. There's a ton going on over there. If you're somebody that is interested in vitamins and supplements, take a look. If you're somebody that's interested in healing or workshops or the like, or getting a part of his VIP membership, that's available too. Go to davidwolf.com, and if you find something you like, the promo code on your way out the door is macro. That'll save some money. Well, this is going to be sort of a follow-up episode to episode 234, which came out, called Operation Gladio 2022, The Strategy of Tension. We're going to go ahead and call this one Operation Gladio 2024, Applying Pressure. That is where we are in this stage of the performance. In 2022, you can't do the things that you're going to need to do in 2024 it's not just it. There's more than just the calendar. It matters about elections and the like. And so this isn't accidental. It's not. It's scripted in a sense that they know. There's a concept called the October surprise in American politics, and what that references is that the elections are going to happen the very first week of November every 4 years when it's an election year. And the October surprise is the monkey wrench that's going to get thrown in at the last minute in October, right before you go to vote in November, that is, surprise, your candidate is a cross-dressing Satanist or whatever it is, or surprise, your son is a crack-smoking human trafficker who likes to party with prostitutes and film himself doing it. I mean, there's a variety of different ways in which the October surprise can go, but it's a thing because it matters when you drop the surprise, right? So the timing matters. The Gladio of 2022 will be different than the Gladio of 2024 because of elections, of course, and because they want you to feel a certain way. And no better group to be involved in making you feel a certain way with regard to elections than the Operation Gladio group. That's what they were put in place to do. So what we'll do here is I'll do a little recap of the history of NATO's Operation Gladio. If anyone that caught episode 234, and I encourage you to go back and listen to it if you're interested. This is this was a tactic. Anyway, I'll explain a little bit about the background of it, and then I want to go into where we're going, what sort of surprises we have in store for us towards the end of the year, and we'll wrap up sort of with President Kamala Harris. Can you say that out loud? Say it. Practice saying President Kamala Harris, because you might have to say that in November. Just try it out. I'm not saying that she's a great candidate. I'm not saying you should vote for her. I'm just saying they have ways to make you become the president, at 3 a.m. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Operation Gladio, because you might think, oh, well, that happened in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, and times have changed, and maybe it's beneficial to know a little bit about it for historic purposes, but whatever sort of tactics they used back then are old-timey, and of course we're in digital age now, and the digital era, we're going to have different tactics. And you're right, of course. But some things never change. Some things don't have to be reinvented. You don't need to develop the concept of sexual blackmail entrapment operations. These have been around for a while. So some of it's old, some of it's new, but there's one thing that you will understand, and I think you can feel it. And Sam Tripoli talks about this a lot, if you're a tinfoil hat listener. Pressure from above, pressure from below. That's the key, right? If there's too much top-down authoritarian pressure, it'll squeeze you out the back. You know what I mean? If you're squishing down on a hamburger, everything's going to come out the sides, right? If you do it slowly enough, and you push and you apply pressure from beneath as well, you can create a scenario in which there's nowhere to go. You're stuck in this pressure cooker. And we've heard the boiling frogs analogy over the years, and it works well in that you can envision a scenario in which things get bad slowly enough that it's not there's not a particular event that goes, time to wake up, time to pay attention. It's just they turn up the temperature a little bit every day. And I think that NATO is involved in the Trump shootings. And I believe that with no, I mean, I'm not there. I have zero evidence. Okay, let me just be crystal clear. I have zero evidence to back up my theory that NATO is involved, except that I have no evidence because I'm not in a position to collect evidence, by the way. I'm not saying I have no evidence because there is no evidence. I'm just saying I don't have it. But let me tell you what I do have. I do have a working knowledge of how NATO operates. And because I know what they do and how they do it and what they've done in the past, they have to be considered a suspect for this. And I am willing to entertain a variety of theories on the Trump situation. Because he was shot at and he was hit in the ear, and that ear looked pretty good to me. Okay, so I have questions about that, right? But in the grand scheme of things, the way these people see a situation like that is that if outcome A happens, then X, right? So if outcome A happens and Trump is killed, then X. If outcome A happens and Trump is alive, then pivot to Y. And so anything works in this scenario. You say, well, they tried to kill him, they missed, it's a failure. No. If they were trying, first of all, I am of the belief, if they were trying to kill him, he'd be dead. I'm just saying that NATO marksmen, if they wanted a NATO marksman on this to clean up the mess that the kid missed on the first go-around, Trump would be dead. So I'm not trying to say I have this all figured out. But in the end, this is ultimately what it boils down to, is that when your process is a strategy of tension, then any amount of pressure can work. Chaos is, you can weaponize that. The fear that comes of being at a Trump rally, you can manage that. You can weaponize that and use that again, to your advantage. So this isn't necessarily that, if Trump lives, then this was a failure. No. If Trump lives and survives the assassination attempt, then we have a whole variety of other plans that open up. So this is like a I have to put everything in like sports terminology for my brain. But it's one thing to have. You have a football coach knows what to do according to down and distance, right? The game dictates what plays you run based on the scenario, right? So sometimes you don't throw the Hail Mary play when you only need a half a yard, right? And with regard to Operation Gladio, some of this stuff, you don't need to kill the potential president to accomplish your goals of creating chaos. You can miss him, and that creates chaos as well. It's just, how do you manage the public? How do you manage the general public? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to make them scared and get them into the polling boxes to vote in November? Or are you trying to get them scared and get them to not go to the polling boxes? It just depends on what your strategy is here. And so when we look at, when I say that I think that NATO is involved in it, well, they have a long history of being involved in stuff like this. Olof Palme, Prime Minister, murdered by NATO. The hit squad, by the way, the hit squad, at least how it had been in the past, and it may have changed hands and maybe they've outsourced this or made some adjustments, but it had always been the Wallenbergs that were doing the assassinations for NATO. So again, I don't know if they're still the person to go to in a scenario like this, but this would not be the first time that NATO had been involved in political assassinations, political assassination attempts, all of this. So NATO started in 1948. The CIA started in 1947. It was previously the OSS. And if you look at like the time frame of this, it was like the tail end of 47 for the CIA and like the early part of 48 for NATO. So within months, these organizations were either formed or rebranded. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or North Atlantic Terrorist Organization is a more apt term for them. NATO is a terrorist organization, an international global terrorist organization, as more dangerous than Al Qaeda, or in comparison to something along those lines. So, in 1947, the first order of business for the CIA was to destabilize the elections in Italy to make sure that they didn't go communist. If they had gone communist, then according to the brand new NATO charter that was going to be forming months later, NATO had it in their charter that you can't admit a country into the group that is communist. And Italy was in danger of flipping communist because they are always in danger of flipping when it comes to politics. And so the CIA fortified that election. Let's just put it that way. Fortified the election to make sure that it wasn't communist. And then it wasn't. And then Italy was able to join NATO and become part of this. And then here we get Operation Gladio. Now, Operation Gladio was the answer to, the question was, what happens after World War II if the Soviet Union, who agreed to stop on the east, the eastern half of Germany, and what if the Americans go home to America and take all their gear with them, and then the Soviets decide that they want to take the rest of Germany and maybe even France? What happens if that's the scenario? So in order to stop that, NATO said what we would do is we would need to buy enough time to get you guys back out here from the across the ocean and back out here to start this war again. So what we would do is we would leave behind, hidden domestic terrorist groups, terrorist cells. And these terrorist cells would create havoc for the Soviets, right? As soon as the Soviets started this war push, we would activate Operation Gladio, terror cells, and these terror cells would go cause problems for the Soviets, blow up bridges, whatever, create enough chaos and diversion to bog the Soviets down with dealing with them, to buy enough time so that the reinforcements can get there. That was the strategy of Operation Gladio. The thing is that the Soviets never came any further west. They just said, "Well, yeah, we're fine here," and then eventually got pushed out. Right. So it never happened the way they thought it could happen. Now it wasn't unreasonable for NATO to suspect that something like that could happen. I mean, if you listen to what Patton said after the war, he was of the belief we fought the wrong enemy in World War II. That we should have fought the Soviets, that they were the real problem, that the Bolsheviks and Soviets and everything were always going to be the actual problem here. Of course, then General Patton's Jeep blows up after that and he's dead. So, oh well, mistakes were made, I suppose. But this leave behind force of Gladio, their motto, "In silence we serve freedom," right? So here we go. They're sitting around waiting for the Soviets to do something. Nothing ever happens. So what are you going to do with them? Well, let's put them to use. Let's put these guys, we've got domestic terrorists, and our intention was to use them for good, in a sense, to fight our enemies and create diversions and problems for our enemies. But since our enemies aren't really acting like our enemies anymore, they're doing their own thing, what do you say we use these guys to, shape domestic policy around here, get the general public to feel a certain way by shooting up a school in Belgium or blowing up the Bologna train station or whatever, all the blowing up, setting off car bombs and things like that. You create what they described as the strategy of tension. to get everybody just on edge enough. And when you're on edge, and when you're scared, you'll make short-term decisions. And of course, the messaging comes along with the fear. First comes the fear, then comes the messaging. Oh, you want to make the fear go away? Vote this way in the next election, or do this, or sign your sons up to fight in this war, or whatever the thing is. They can get you to feel a certain way by committing acts of terrorism and blaming it on the enemy, whichever enemy that may be. And that's a constantly changing enemy. But whatever it is, whenever the bombs go off, it's always the other team doing it. Now, we know it's false flag terrorism, and we understand this because it's so obvious. But the general public is the last to figure this out. They never connect those dots. They're far too trusting or lazy or stupid or terrorized and traumatized or whatever. They're just willing to accept whatever the first answer is, especially if it's your enemies did this to you and make you feel a certain way. So Gladio's been here for a long time. And in 1964, the Gladio network pulled a coup with the help of the CIA to force all the socialists out of the Italian government. That was 1964. It was just like what they did in 1947. So, the tactics still remain. You don't have to improve upon it too much. Fear sells. How you deliver that fear might change, but the concept of scaring the shit out of people to make them do what you want them to do is an old tactic that works extremely well. And depending on how you do it, it can be very affordable. So you wind up, and of course, NATO has access to a ton of money. Of course, America foots the bill on most of it, but they're not at a loss for cash. They have access to revenue. That's why they're able to, get involved in this for decades, because they're never going to run out of money. They've always got units available. They were involved in the Piazza Fontana bombing, the Brabant massacres in Belgium. That was from 1982 to 1985, in which 28 people were killed during that. The Patano bombing, that's the booby-trapped car bombing. We talked about that in episode 234. The Oktoberfest bombing in Munich. I mean, this is not Al-Qaeda doing bombing. This is not some unhinged terrorist group doing the bombings. This is NATO doing the bombings. So when you hear the politicians say NATO doesn't conduct airstrikes, NATO isn't involved in that, I can get Tony Arterburn on the phone, and he can tell you from personal experience being in Kosovo as a member of the Army Rangers, parachuting in there. He said we were all doing spotting missions for NATO. So this idea that NATO doesn't bomb is preposterous. He was working with NATO. He saw them bombing. So the operation in Inglington, Dutch division of Gladio, run by Prince Bernhard, and the largest drug dealer in the Netherlands. Are you familiar with this? Pedophile sex ring with royals in the House of Orange. Operation Gladio works a variety of ways. You can get the normal people out there scared of train stations blowing up and grocery stores getting shot up. But the Dutch division of Gladio was run by royals. Run by a royal. Prince Bernhard started Bilderberg these guys are deeply involved. He started the World Wildlife Fund with Prince Philip, and so when you hear about these groups, Gladio groups tied to Dutch royalty, don't act surprised. It's been like this for my entire lifetime, if not longer. So, this is how it's done. Assassination squads brought in by the Wallenbergs, carried out by NATO jackals. At least it was. I don't know, maybe it's differently now. And we've had these conversations with Ole Damagard, both on this show. I've had him in private with him, talking about the role of the traveling road show, the NATO traveling road show. It's like Monday Night Football. They have you ever seen what goes on behind the scenes of the Monday Night Football broadcast? It's amazing. There's 11 semis that are involved, and they're trucking all this stuff around, and they go from city to city, and it's on the schedule, and they set it up. And I'm like, and I'm talking to Ole about this, and he's saying they do the same thing with NATO. It's a traveling road show. It's like a rock band or whatever, and it's like, are you ready for some football? Like, are you ready for some false flags? A Monday night party. I mean, this is where we're headed with this stuff. This has been going on for a while. That was the conversation 3 o'clock in the morning in Acapulco, of course, where he said, watch for bikes and shoes. Watch for bikes and shoes. Okay? If you want to know if NATO's involved, watch for bikes and shoes in these pictures. In the images that the media uses, and of course we've talked about this before, the psychological component of that, when there's a picture, let's say there's a bombing somewhere, and the image on the cover of the Los Angeles Times newspaper is a kid's bicycle that's like flipped over, it's just kind of like on the ground, it's just a picture of the bicycle, and it's like, 8 dead and the bombing, blah, 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 blah. The imagery of a bicycle on the ground without a child riding the bicycle, or a shoe, child-size shoe without a foot in it, implies that under normal circumstances, there would be a child wearing that shoe and maybe even riding on that bicycle, but there's not, because everybody's dead. That's what they want you to think. There would be some child on this bike, but he's blown to pieces. Aren't you scared now? Aren't you traumatized now? This could be your kid. Do you have a bike? Do you like bikes? Have you ever ridden a bike? Do you own shoes? Do you wear shoes? Have you ever worn a shoe? Have you ever lost a shoe? You could connect with this image, right? Think of what would happen if you didn't have if you were so scared that you just ran off and left your shoes. So all of this stuff is by design. And I'll tell you what, man, in my warped, fucked up head where I hear OPDM sound drops constantly and funny lines from movies in my head, like running commentary for this whole thing, I have to say that, like, the second time they tried to shoot at Trump, right? The dude on the golf course, twice in 60 days. They aren't sending their best. But immediately when I heard that there was a guy on the golf course and he had a gun and he was just shooting it, I just kept thinking, he hates these cans. He hates these cans. And, and Navin Johnson running away from the, die gas pumper and like that, the gas. In my mind, it's The Jerk. It's the movie The Jerk. It's what it is. It's comedy. It's insanity. I mean, of course, it's serious business. We're talking about potentially murdering the former president of the United States. That's an assassination attempt by any metrics, right? Now, again, they're sending the JV team, okay? Everybody that seems to be wanting to shoot at Trump is missing, I don't know, a chromosome or something. There's something off, which makes me think, again, it's like, do you want him dead or do you just want everybody in the pressure cooker? Because if you wanted him dead, he'd be dead. I think so. And so if you want everybody angry, mission accomplished, right? You've got the Trump people bent out of shape. You have the Biden people talking about he brought it on himself, victim shit. It's like, well, what did you think was going to go happen to you when you went out to the nightclub wearing that dress? I mean, what did you expect? You wanted everybody to look at you, right? You wanted everybody to take a shot at you at the golf course. I mean, how dare you go play golf? What did you expect? with your dangerous rhetoric. It's always the left accusing everybody else of dangerous rhetoric as they literally call for people to murder the president. I don't know. So it just. But I'll tell you what. Let's talk about this. If the kid at the Pennsylvania rally had been 2 centimeters in the other direction, we would be talking about this in a very different way. We would be talking because of, again, he would have been dusted 5 seconds after he took the shot anyway, which he was. And we would have a much different conversation. We would be talking about how it was the perfect operation because he got the president and then they got him, right? Tied up all the loose ends before that kid even had a chance to pick his head up off the rangefinder, right? So you put one right in his head immediately, and then that solves all the problems. But it didn't happen that way. So again, it's like if the answer is A, you go with then things unfold according to that. If the outcome is B, then things are different. But it doesn't mean that they can still work with a missed shooting. In fact, they may prefer that the shooting is missed. So, but Crooks would have been Lee Harvey Oswald Jr. if he'd made that shot. If he'd just been just a fraction off, right? We would have a totally different conversation. Not to be overly dramatic, but like the world would be totally different. It really would in some regards. I'm not saying it would be, it would be an apocalypse or anything like that, but the behavior of a segment of the people in America is restrained because the president was not killed. Had he been shot, there's a lot of people, the same type of people that were enthusiastic about the events of January 6th. And thought to show up there and show support. There's going to be a lot of people that show support, right? So either way, pressure from above, pressure from below. It all feels a bit stage managed to me, though. Like the fist pump after the shot, the photographers there, they frame that picture right. I mean, again, I'm willing to have the conversations with people about this, and I'm not. I haven't anchored my beliefs into one thing or another at this point. There's a whole lot more to understand, and I suppose it is possible that if you'd been shot, you just had like a ton of adrenaline and you jumped up and you were just like you went full football coach mode and you just pumped your fist and said, let's fucking fight, and you did all that stuff out of pure adrenaline. I suppose. And there are a bunch of photographers there. That is true. There's always photographers there. And is it possible that they could have just got the most epic shot with the flag in the background? Sure. I suppose. And I am willing to allow that there is a segment of this that could be authentic. But man, I've seen a lot of things like this in the past that turned out to be frauds and fakeries and whatnot. And so I'm very hesitant to call it either way with regard to the Trump stuff. But it doesn't, in the end, my point is that it doesn't ultimately matter if the purpose is tension. Because if the purpose is tension, whether you kill him or miss him, it's still tension. It's just a different flavor of it, right? And it might even be better if you want to bubble this thing up to not kill him, right? To just make everybody think that you could or that you would or that you will, and do that early enough in the middle of summer so that you've got another couple months to make him really second guess every time he goes out in public, make him question all this stuff, just make everything, bog him down in the details of security or lack of security or whatnot, and keep him doing that, keep his followers, constantly percolating with rage and anger, and then the media stops reporting on it like it never happened, and all of this. that photo was like, it was a little too much for me. Had it been, had it been blurry a little bit, I don't know, man. I get suspicious about this stuff. But I think that what it does, undeniably what it does, is it manipulates people's emotions. The shootings. It makes Trump supporters feel a certain way. It makes the Harris, Biden, whatever those people are, feel a certain way. It exposes them, a lot of them. They're like, I wish they'd got him the first time around. Good. Keep saying all these things. We'll get all the people on record for that. Let's talk a little bit about part of this summer, the summer of 2024, and this pressure that they have been exerting on us. I have a very simple question. It is an honest question. I need an answer. Who is the president of the United States? Because it doesn't feel like it's Joe Biden. It hasn't felt like it's Joe Biden really ever, but we've discussed the role of the Trilateral Commission, Susan Rice, Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, the Obama crew behind the scenes, and we know what they're up to. But what do you think? Psychologically, you're a nation of Americans. You have a president. The president of the United States during the summer of 2024 was Joe Biden. Joe Biden would go out on stage and forget who he was talking to and get lost coming off the stage. That's undeniable. So we go through a situation where he's no longer going to be allowed to run to renew his term to continue being president of the United States. At that moment, he ceased to exist in America. Just for those of you listening to this from outside of the United States, just so you know, after they decided to pivot to Kamala Harris, Joe Biden might as well actually be dead because nobody cares about him. He's been on the beach since then. And they have these images of him like with the beach chair reclined full. I mean, he looks dead. It looks like Weekend at Bernie's. It has looked like Weekend at Bernie's for a while, but they've incorporated the beach scenes into it, which we appreciate, of course. And remember when they put his corpse on that bicycle and pretended like he was riding a bike around? That was funny. But the whole thing is par for the course, because much as I said, the Trump shooting felt a bit stage managed. The Biden administration has been stage managed from the beginning. If you get the American people like, yeah, let's turn on the news and hear the message from the Oval Office. Joe Biden's going to address the general public. Let's watch that. And you turn it on, you go, wait, where are they? And they go, well, it's the Oval Office. And you go, no, it's not. That's not the Oval Office. That's not the Oval Office. That's a soundstage. What is going on here? Why is there a window over there? Why is there a window? You know what I mean? Like this, there's a set. It's a set. They were playing president or filming for a movie documentary series on Joe Biden pretending to be president or something along the lines. I'm not really sure, but he is. They built a replica of the Oval Office, and my question is why? Like why? Why didn't? Again, and maybe there's a very reasonable explanation for it, but I need to know why. Because again, this feels more and more the component of the strategy of tension is that this is the most genius and diabolical component of it. It's that it's not any one thing. It's just never-ending little things that are put on top, until it just eventually it weighs you down and you're just under so much stress that you crack or you just want to make it go away. Whatever you want, just tell me what you need me to do and make it go away. So But they pulled a presidential switcheroo on the general public of the United States, really the world, but in America in particular here. They pulled a presidential switcheroo in the summer of 2024, and nobody's getting an explanation on what's happening here. Who is the president of the United States? The fact that I have to ask that question is part of the strategy of tension. Okay? This has never happened before. It's never been like this before. It's never been as bad before, right? All of those thoughts that people have, that's the point. That's the pressure from above, pressure from below, squeezing you in. It's never been this bad. We've never done this. We've never had a president this incompetent. We've never had a president that took this many days off. We've never had a president that can't find his way off the stage. We've never had all these things feel unprecedented in their insanity. And it feels like it's getting worse. It feels like the insanity is accelerating. So Kamala Harris is going to run for the president of the United States, as you might have heard. She got as many delegates in 2020 as you and I did, which is to say 0. She is in this position only because she is a woman of color. If she were a white man and had the credentials that Kamala Harris had, she would be unqualified. He would be unqualified. He could identify as a non-white woman and then be qualified, of course, because in the Biden-Harris administration, facts aren't really important. It's more about feelings. So you just tell us how you feel, and that's good enough for us. And if you feel like getting 0 delegates in 2020 is stunning and brave because inside you feel that way, then that's good enough for you, and you should just be the president of the United States, even though everybody in your own party wants nothing to do with you. I've noticed over the last 4 years that we've had this, and I'm not gonna tie this to Gladio. I'm not gonna say that Gladio had anything to do with it. But when we're talking about anxiety and tension and the things that come along with that, it's remarkable over the 4 years or so that Biden's been in office that DEI has spiked. When he came in, it was the hot thing, right? Every big corporation was getting on board with it, and they were really pushing for it. I was of the belief that it was going to take something like another Trump administration to end DEI. What I have found is that Joe Biden's administration has done a good enough job just being incompetent that they've ruined DEI on their own. So again, back to the tension of complying with all the diversity, equity, inclusion sorts of criteria that is made up by DEI divisions, this new way of imagining shareholder value. It's only a dumb communist could come up with a concept like this. It's been tried, tested, and rejected all in one administration. So the Biden administration, regardless of whether Kamala gets in there and continues this, DEI is going away. It's been voted out by the corporations that got on board. They were bribed into following it anyway. I mean, most of those people come out of business school and they could give a flying fuck about what color you are as long as you make them money. So the idea that you're going to all of a sudden pivot away from profits and prioritize inclusivity is delusional and retarded on its face. So, welcome to reality. So that's now the chaos of of reimagining society, especially inside your corporation, your woke corporation, to make DEI the focal point of everything and make sure your TPS reports all have DEI compliance in there and all that good shit. And now all of a sudden that's been thrown out the window and corporations are going, you know what? This stuff is really dumb after all. It doesn't make anybody better. It doesn't make us any more money. It just creates chaos and confusion. Oh, and by the way, you, the head of equity, diversity, and inclusion in this office, would it kill you to take a shower every couple weeks? For God's sake, you smell like shit. Get out of here. So this is what corporations are having to come to this realization that, oh, wait a second, this is nonsensical garbage, and we don't want anything to do with it. We're going to have to now shift all of our production back and away from this and the chaos and confusion that comes with that. It's busy work for corporations that don't need it. They're already fighting regulation battles. They're trying to go up against industries that the American federal government subsidizes and trying to compete with that unbalanced playing field. And then you go in there and tell everybody you need a one-legged Eskimo midget on your board of directors, and everybody's rushing to go do that to reimagine their company. And of course it's chaotic. You can't run a company and try and plan for the next 5 years when you don't know how things are going to play out. And of course, nobody does. But you at least get a certain amount of stability over the last, in history, you've been able to bank on certain things for the economy. You're not worried that the dollar is going to go away, but you are now. It's a calculation you have to make. Bidenomics was a disaster. And the economy is a catastrophe. And if you think that, well, maybe we'll just, maybe the future will save us. Maybe we're going through a rough patch, but these new kids are going to come in and they're going to come into America and they're going to reimagine America and we're going to be fine. Oh, except that, Baltimore and Chicago schools are churning out nothing but private prison future revenue streams disguised as human beings with social security numbers and not much else. I mean, you're going to be a dependent on the state forever if you've come out of the Baltimore and Chicago schools. So they're not coming to save you. You'll be a number on a spreadsheet for Geo Group for their quarterly revenues when you wind up in a private prison that they own because you were too stupid to get a job at McDonald's because McDonald's went to robots because it doesn't make sense to pay you $16 an hour when you can't get on the bus and get to work on time. So the world is changing, in case people didn't notice. And for those people who are starting to notice, it's time to panic. And unfortunately, the kids coming out of the Chicago schools and the Baltimore schools are the ones who should panic the most, but they don't know they're supposed to. They don't understand what's going on and where they're headed. They're going to be living in a world in which robots do a majority of the jobs that they might have gotten, and they're going to live in a society where people view them as disposable because they don't have marketable skills because they forgot to evolve. We've watched the Democrats in particular, and I'm not trying to say the Republicans are better, but the Democrats definitely have a strategy that they have used to create tension for their voting bloc, and they use it. They've used it for 60, 70 years. The Democrats want their voters to be down on the reservation, on the American plantation reservation. They want them to be dependent on the state. The state is useless and should be irrelevant. But when you get a bunch of people that don't have much or anything, and the state says, we will give you something, but these are the conditions. You will get those people to perform the conditions in order to receive whatever it is that you want to give them. So government is relevant as long as people are desperate. And desperate people need government. People that aren't desperate, all they want to do is get away from government as fast as they can because they know it brings them nothing. So the American government is like a slave plantation. And when you go through Baltimore and Chicago schools, really any government public schools, what you find is that you become just skilled enough to be a serf working on the plantation. You're never going to own the castle. You're always going to pay your tithe to the king because you're a slave on the land. Now, if you wanted to own the castle, you'd have to come up with a plan and a strategy. And you'd have to band together and you'd have to work together. But as long as you're taking handouts from the castle, you're never going to get to the castle. You're never going to own the castle, right? So the EBT cards for the slaves to shop at the company store has been a trap. We've talked about this with regard to universal basic income and how the mice get stuck in the trap because they can never figure out why the cheese is free. Well, human beings get stuck in the proverbial mouse trap as well because they can't figure out why the EBT is free. It's free because they need something for you. They need you to vote a certain way in the elections. And they also need you, if you're taking handouts from the government, you're going to do exactly what the government wants you to do, needs you to do, which is fill out the paperwork, take the vaccine, insert whatever authoritarian measures they dream up in the future, because it'll all be tied to that. So, oh, and by the way, not for nothing, but the EBT card, the electronic, the debit card, used to be food stamps here in the U.S., and now it's digital and it's on a debit card, and so it's not humiliating for the people that need to use it. Of course, it's tough enough to ask for help. You don't want to be humiliated when you pull out your packet of food stamps, and that happened in the past, and that was shitty and all. And now there's less stigmatization associated with it because you've got the debit card, but still, that debit card, the EBT, is tied to the Department of Agriculture. It's a big agra giveaway to those companies that make the food, the big the General Mills of the world and things like that. Because the EBT card has certain restrictions on what you can and can't use it for. And you can't use it to buy cigarettes or alcohol or lottery tickets or any of that shit. But you can spend it on certain things, and things that you can spend it on fall under the purview of the Department of Agriculture, and it's definitely helpful for the big agri companies that make all this stuff, which is, the majority of it is not good for you. Low quality GMO crops sprayed with glyphosate. But it's food, right? It's big agri food, and we will give you free food, but the free food we're going to give you comes with conditions, and by the way, it's going to be the low quality food that you get. Let's move on here. I want to talk about some more. We've called this, I don't know, pressure from below. The commies are coming, was what they said in the 1950s. If you remember that, the Red Scare. The commies are coming. They're coming to get you. We had those hearings, and it was a big deal back then, and everyone was concerned about communists. And they were right around the corner. It's like terrorists, right? They're right around the corner, and they're definitely going to murder you. And they're invisible. As soon as you get around the corner, you'll look for them, but you'll never see them. But if only we had more money, then we could get rid of them, right? So the imaginary commies of the 50s have been replaced with the actual Haitians of 2024. Have you noticed? Did you see that? That the Haitians are being demonized here. I just did an episode about Haiti and the massive problems that they have. And I'll say what I said in that episode. I'm not trying to make the Haitian people feel bad or dunk on them. They've had it hard enough. It's really troubling what they've been going through under the boot of the French and the Americans over the years, and the Spanish too before them. But in America in 2024, they have decided that the Haitians eating cats is it's moving straight to the top of the line. You know, you wonder about that, right? Like I in my mind, I envision some like boardroom workshop where they're all throwing out these ideas, and some dude's like, I don't know, let's have Haitians eating cats, and they're like, I like that. Let's put that up on the dry erase board, and they write Haitians with cats. Like, does it have to be cats, or could it be dogs? Could they eat well, they could eat dogs too, yeah, but they'll eat the shit out of cats, though. Let's put cats up there. And like, okay, fine. So that's, you know, so you go down that path, right? Create this chaos, create this tension. But one of the things that has come as a result of these open border policies, which I think that most people have been paying attention to, is that they have imported non-English speaking military-age men by the hundreds of thousands, and they treat those people like gold. They cannot bend over backwards to give those people. Where would you like to go, sir? We're having buses anywhere. You just name the major metropolitan city, and we'll send you there. You have relatives in Milwaukee. Get on the bus to Milwaukee, Javier. You'll be there in no time, and we'll provide you with a EBT card or a debit card, and we'll provide you with all the necessities that you need, and we'll put you up in a hotel and all that stuff. And then now the inner city blacks are they're going to the meetings. You're like, hang on a second. What about us? What happened to us? And the politicians are going, I'm sorry, who are you? You've been here a while. You haven't helped us at all. You know, we've moved on. Perhaps you haven't noticed. There's a new band in town. They don't speak English, but we like them a lot more than you. Have a seat. You guys, you can bring your complaints to the mayor's office if you'd like, but Mayor Brandon Johnson's not going to do a damn thing about it. He's the dumbest mayor in the history of the United States. And if you think that you're going to get help from him, what you need to understand is that to those of you in the black community out there that are going to the city council meetings and are now rightly angry because all the shelters that you used to go to have now been overtaken, and all of the outreach programs that were available for you have gone away, and all the clothing that you used to count on has disappeared, and all the handouts at the missions and the shelters are all gone, and you have come to your elected officials, and you've all shown up at this town hall event, and you are going to voice your frustrations, and I am here to tell you, you've been had. You've been had. You have nobody to blame but yourself. Look in the mirror. If you want to get mad at anybody for falling into this trap, look in the mirror. You've done it to yourself. You went ahead and believed a politician. That's on you. You've been replaced by the non-English speaking migrants, by a government that hates your guts and wants you dead. Welcome to the party, black community. Are you paying attention now? Are you awake? Do you just realize that you've been used? You have been used. How does it feel? Pretty frustrating, huh? Well, now you can understand what the Republicans have been pissed about for decades watching this. Watching unqualified people get handouts that don't need it, that wreck the system and warp the system and manipulate it and do all that stuff. And the Republicans have been watching you guys for a long time going, you are screwing this country up. And what'd you say? Gimme, 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 gimme more, gimme more, gimme more. They were saying, you're the problem here. And you just said, gimme, gimme more. Well, guess what? There's no more to give to you. And now you can see the problem for what it really is. Insert disproportionately large group of people into certain geographic areas to swing voting patterns. You mean like 20,000 Haitians into a 60,000 population of Springfield, Ohio? You mean like that big of a demographic swing? You could allow or direct Venezuelan gang members into apartments in Denver and Chicago, then make sure the media makes a big, huge deal out of it, right? You could do that. What would that do? Would that create chaos and tension? You bet it would, especially if you lived in those areas. Inflation, the silent killer. Brought to you by every president that's in my lifetime. I know everyone wants to pin it on Biden and say, inflation. It's all Bidenomics. Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot of it is. But let's not forget what Donald Trump did during his administration. And, of course, since we're talking about inflation, we're talking about the cost of everything going up, we're talking about fast food in California going to $20 an hour minimum wage from $16. In $16 an hour in California, now $20 an hour for fast food. We've discussed this ad nauseum. With an Excel spreadsheet is going to barge into his boss's office and say, I found the number. This is the number. At this number, anything above this number, we immediately switch to robots. Anything below, we can keep it with humans. We can keep this thing going with humans. But the second we get above this threshold, the numbers tell us to get rid of the people. So it's coming. And robots and artificial intelligence will be eliminating the need for many jobs. So, learn to weld or learn to code or whatever. Or don't. Not my problem. But it is important to remind ourselves that the powers that be know that it is important to keep the sheep scared, especially during elections. World War III is a real possibility in a variety of locations. And in looking back on trigger events for former world wars, they're always started with false flags. So it's not even like it's not even like you could look at the battlefield and go, there's no appetite on the battlefield for these guys to continue this any further. It looks like, the Ukraine-Russia thing should come to an end. Well, sure, it could look like that on the battlefield. But don't forget, like I said, that they start these wars with false flags. So there may be no authentic appetite to continue the wars, but I would remind you of what the U.S. and the British did to the peace process in Ukraine, which could have been over. The war could have ended several months after it started, but the U.S. and the Brits said no to that. They don't want that. They want this war to continue. So even when there's an appetite to end it, it doesn't get ended. So I worry about that. I worry about World War III in that regard. And I understand that there's part of this is a trap, right, to get you to worry. And if you worry, you're trapped in it, right? So maybe worry isn't the right word. Aware. I don't know where that boundary is between being aware and being worried because of what you're aware of, but I guess try to stay away from the fear side of things to the extent that you can, but make an accurate calculation. They want you to be fearful. That's undeniable. They want you to be fearful for a variety of reasons. It screws up your body chemistry with cortisol. You make short-term decisions at the expense of long-term decisions. You make a decision. You might not have been in a position. You might not have wanted to or been in a position to make any decision, and all of a sudden you're forced to. Look. We now live in a world of exploding pagers. Okay. And once you acknowledge that you live in that, now, you and I aren't in any threat, or we're not in any danger of getting our nuts blown off by exploding Hezbollah pagers. But we know of them, and that information is in our brains now. In some level, we are aware of it. Does it rule our day-to-day thinking? No, it probably will not. But we are now living in a world where pagers sometimes explode when the Israelis get their hands on them. So you take that and insert that into your brain and process it however you need to. And in doing so, the reality of the situation becomes a little bit more heavier, a little more tense. Houthis blowing up ships in the Red Sea. What does that mean for us? Well, again, that's not necessarily NATO doing that, but it's the response to NATO that's creating a situation where people are doing that. How does that impact us? Oh, I don't know. How did supply chain disruptions impact us during COVID with regard to toilet paper? We've been shown that Americans in large groups will behave poorly when needed to keep it together. It will not go well. So does it, is it easy for us to dismiss what's going on in the Red Sea when you live in America? Sure, of course. But when you take a look at how everything is connected and understand the supply chains, and energy needs to flow through there on these ships, and they need to get to us. And if they don't get to us, then we're going to have other problems, and that it's going to be supply chain related. Oh, and by the way, there's a strike scheduled for the Eastern Seaboard and Gulf Coast shipping ports in America. So when you get into a situation where the ports on two of the three sides that you count on to receive goods, in your southern flank in the Gulf of Mexico and along the eastern seaboard, those ports are all shut down due to some labor dispute, which is currently a thing. Then and as of the recording of this, they have not gone on strike, but they have threatened to go on strike. So by the time you hear this, this will have been sorted out. Well, but again, it's a calculation you have to make. Even if they don't go on strike, the fact that you had to sit around and plan what it's going to look like if they go on strike and how that's going to impact things, it all adds up. So, yeah. It's 600,000 local jobs, or local jobs that are impacted by it. Supply chain shipping hell. By the way, in the event of labor strikes in those ports, all of the traffic will get rerouted to the West Coast, to Long Beach and Los Angeles. And you remember what we've talked about with the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles before. Remember that? They parked the ships offshore so that you couldn't see them, but they were piling up there. And they have one of the dumbest ideas ever, which is that every vehicle that's used in the transportation process from the ship to the staging area has to be electric vehicles. And they have to have these electric trucks. They have to put them on electric trucks, but electric trucks don't exist. And it's this huge clusterfuck in the ports because Gavin Newsom is reimagining nature and sunshine and electric vehicles and all this stuff. So you're going to be in container ship hell like you were during COVID. And that was with the East Coast and Gulf Coast ports operating at full capacity. So this is unfortunately part of the plan, is to keep everything. You don't have to break it. That's the thing. You don't have to push the glass all the way off the table. You just have to imply that you might push the glass off the table. And if you do that, it creates the need for resources and energy to be expended to focus on whether or not you're going to push the glass off the table. Do you understand that all of this matters? It's the reason why they want to keep you down in fear on your smartphone, on breaking news. It's the reason why when they have breaking news, they have those sounds, zing, and the music is very authoritative, and it's very, very, because it's to get your attention, to tell you, hey, you need to be really scared about this thing. It's very important here. And the strategy of tension in 2022 was kicked into place. The process of applying that pressure is all around us. Open your eyes. You'll see it here, where Kamala Harris is running on a platform that promises bread lines. That's not good. she's got an entirely long list of new enemies. Well, they're Biden enemies, but they'll be made to be new enemies of the state. You can already feel the tension starting to percolate there for people that might be on this list: white men, constitutionalists, survivalists, preppers, sound money advocates, Second Amendment lovers, people that are proud of being a family unit, straight people, Christians, anti-vaxxers, homeschoolers. They've already said that they want to come after those people. And I'm not trying to again, it's a fine line between I'm not trying to make everybody scared of this, but ... You have to be aware of it first. Be aware that this is what they're trying to do. Now, again, if you're being scared, I don't think you do things from a harmonious flow when you're scared. I think if you come at these problems from a different angle, you'll have better results and get more traction. So again, but it's important to at least verbalize and talk about this, that these are the things that they've said they want to do, right? So not for nothing, but you should probably be paying attention if you're a white man, a member of a family unit, a straight white Christian man who's married. Oh God, they hate your guts. You represent everything that they are not. You represent everything that they can never be, and they hate you for it. And they want you to know that. And I think the general public is kind of paying attention to this now. There's only so many times you could be called the enemy or the problem before you start to stand up for yourselves. So what happens? I want you to practice saying this, President Kamala Harris and First Lady Doug, because they could win. Not because they're appealing candidates, not because they offer joy or any of this stuff. Hell, she'd be in charge. Do you ever get the feeling? Did you see Tim Walz's wife? Did you see her? Did you see her give a speech? The wife of the potential vice president, Tim Walz. Now, you thought Tim Walz was an unusual or peculiar character when you saw him. Have you met his wife? I feel like she is straight out of central casting. You can see it in her eyes. You can always see it in their eyes, right? The crazy is in the eyes. And she comes out. I just feel like she would be in charge of Joy Camp. You remember Joy Camp? You didn't clap loud enough for the dear leader. She would be out there shaking, and those crazy eyes of her. I don't know. I'm just saying. If the Kamala Harris regime gets implemented, it's going to be a dark day. It's going to be, and I will say this as a sort of. For what it's worth. When I hear Congress laying the groundwork for a, quote, mass casualty event with regard to voting for members of Congress, I get very nervous and also a tiny bit erect when I hear about that. Because when you're talking about a mass casualty event, meaning that there aren't going to be a bunch of members of Congress, do tell. What is happening? Why won't there be a bunch of people in Congress all at once? Are they no longer alive? What is the plan? Why are you talking about this? It seems like a very unusual thing for you guys to be discussing a mass casualty event. Do you know something that we don't know? Are you planning something that we don't know? Because again, this is the sort of stuff that makes me suspicious. When they start planning and preparing in advance for events, it makes me think that they have advanced knowledge of said events, which is the reason why they would be planning for them. Okay, it all feels very sane to me, but I get nervous when I hear mass casualty events with regard to members of Congress. I know they don't care about you and me. And of course, my head goes to those unusual public service announcements that we're playing, and in New York City about nuclear war and nuclear attacks, and if you see a missile coming in, I mean, are they laying the groundwork for a false flag terrorist event in which a large percentage of Congress are dead or incapacitated and they need to vote new members in immediately? Is that that's what you're planning for? That's what you're running some sort of unusual simulation about? And I've seen enough of these simulations over the years that have turned out to be very similar to the real thing. So I asked the question, what do you know and when did you know it? So the tactics of NATO's Operation Gladio have been turned against America in conjunction with I would call it a Yuri Bezmenov level demoralization campaign that we've been living through and continue to live through. I don't know. I guess the best I can do is tell you the same thing that, as the Yuri meme says, you were warned. Hey, if you like this episode, you can take the additional step right now of sharing it with your friends and family. You can connect with me. Macroaggressions.io is the place to do it. If you haven't rated the show, boy, we sure would appreciate a 5-star review. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.